The commercial buyer from Ocean Spray stood in knee-deep water, staring at the crimson carpet floating across Lily Moreau's flooded bog. He'd come to laugh. Now he was writing numbers. 32 tons per acre, he said quietly. That's triple the county average. How? Lily said nothing. She was holding her grandfather's field notebook, wrapped in waxed canvas, waterproofed 27 years ago. The annotations inside were older still. 9 weeks earlier, the auction in Plymouth County took 14 minutes. Property 19-442-067, 41 acres, September 21, 2023, 9:33 a.m. The auctioneer stood under a tent on the town hall steps, rain drumming the canvas. Abandoned wetland, eastern edge of the county, acidic soil, failed drainage system, no commercial history. Do I hear 6,000? Lily Moreau, 26 years old, held a cashier's check for $6,400. Everything left after her grandfather died, and the assisted living facility took what he owed. Her hands were steady despite the rain. Around her, men in Carhartt jackets and rubber boots murmured. They knew what she didn't. Wetland that acidic stayed worthless. 6,000, she said. No one countered. The gavel fell. She signed the deed in a room that smelled like wet wool and burnt coffee. The clerk, an older man with weather-beaten hands, pushed the documents across the scarred table. You know this land killed 2 farming operations in the last 15 years. I know, Lily said. His eyes narrowed slightly. Your grandfather Moreau tried to buy this parcel in 1996. Couldn't get the loan. He was a good farmer before the co-op squeezed him out. Lily nodded. She'd been 4 when Grandpa Moreau lost his cranberry operation. 60 acres taken by the bank when the processing co-op changed their contracts and cut prices by 40%. He'd worked other people's bogs after that, saved every dollar in mason jars, written in his field notebook every evening under the lamp in the small house where they lived after Grandma passed. He'd left her 2 things. The $6,400 and a steel lockbox with a combination only she knew. Her grandmother's birthday, month and day. Inside the lockbox, the field notebook, a hand-drawn map of the watershed dated 1958, and a letter on yellowed paper. Her grandfather's handwriting, slanted and firm. The acid is not a curse. It is your advantage. What the co-op boys try to neutralize, you must embrace. Plant the old varietals. Build the traditional beds. The answer is in the notebook, pages 34 to 41. Do not explain yourself to those who dismiss you. Let the harvest speak. She drove out to the property that afternoon in her grandfather's 1989 Ford F-150, which leaked oil and had 198,000 miles showing. The land was a bowl of dark water and sphagnum moss, ringed by scrub pine. The soil, where you could find it, was the color of rust. A collapsed pump house leaned into the water. Broken irrigation pipes surfaced like bones. The pH test kit she'd bought showed 4.2. Commercially productive cranberry bogs ran between 4.5 and 5.5. Hers was more acidic than anyone farmed successfully. She walked the perimeter. It took 2 hours and 10 minutes. Her boots sucking at mud, water seeping through the seams. The previous owners had tried to farm this conventionally, pumping out the natural water, adding lime to raise pH, planting modern hybrid vines that needed carefully controlled conditions. The acid always won. The operations always failed. That night, in the camper shell she'd mounted on the truck bed, parked at the property's edge, Lily opened the notebook to pages 34 to 41 by battery lantern. Her grandfather's notes were copied from something older, techniques practiced by the original bog farmers in the 1800s, adapted from Wampanoag knowledge. The pages showed detailed sketches, shallow waterbeds, not drained. Vines drawn with careful labels. Not the modern hybrids everyone planted. Heritage varietals, early black, Howes McFarlane. Vines that thrived in high-acid conditions, actually produced better in them. Below the sketches, calculations. In faded pencil, flooding cycles, harvest schedules, soil chemistry management. The modern co-ops wanted drained bogs, controlled irrigation, hybrid vines. This was the opposite. Work with the natural acidity, keep the traditional flood system, plant what belonged there. The next morning, she drove 6 hours north to a conservation farm in Maine and walked their heritage bog until she found what she needed. The farm manager, a woman named Sarah Plant, maybe 60, watched her. You're looking at the old vines? Yes, ma'am. I need cuttings. I can pay. Sarah studied her. Where's your bog? Plymouth County. 41 acres. High acid. How high? 4.2. Sarah's eyebrows rose. And you want early blacks and house? Yes, ma'am. Those'll handle it. Might even love it. But the co-ops won't buy heritage varieties. No commercial market. I'll find one, Lily said. Sarah sold her 200 cuttings at cost. $600 that left Lily with almost nothing. Back at the property, she used the truck to clear debris, stacked usable wood from the pump house. With borrowed equipment she couldn't afford, a small excavator, $160 a day, for days, charged to a maxed credit card, she reshaped the natural depressions into traditional flood beds following the contour lines on her grandfather's 1958 map. The county extension agent arrived on the 5th day. Someone had called him. He wore waders and drove a white truck with the state seal. You're Lily Moreau? I heard you bought the acid pit. Yes, sir. He walked out into the shallow water where she'd been working, looked at the bed she was shaping, the natural flooding pattern she was restoring. What are you planting? Heritage cranberries. Early black and house. His face went carefully neutral. Miss Moreau, the co-ops don't buy heritage fruit. The commercial market wants Stevens, Ben Lear, modern hybrids with high yield and uniform size. And you need to manage your pH. 4.2 is too acidic even for cranberries. These varieties prefer high acid, Lily said quietly. He looked at her like she'd claimed the earth was flat. Miss Moreau, I have a degree in agricultural science. Cranberries tolerate acid soil, but they don't prefer it. You need to lime this land, raise the pH, and plant commercial varieties. Otherwise you're wasting your time. After he left, she kept working. The September sun was pale through morning fog. Her waders leaked. She didn't stop. 3 weeks later, she planted the first beds. The extension agent's words echoed, but so did her grandfather's. Do not explain yourself to those who dismiss you. The cuttings went into rust-colored mud that everyone said was too acidic to farm. The vines took root in 11 days. Lily waded through the flooded beds at dawn on October 19th, watching tiny green shoots emerge from the cuttings. Each vine was fragile, adapted for harsh conditions most modern hybrids couldn't handle. They didn't fight the acid, they were built for it. But rooting wasn't thriving. She had $43 in her bank account, a quarter tank of gas, and a credit card company threatening collections on the excavator rental. The neighbors came to watch like it was a public failure in slow motion. The property bordered 2 commercial operations, the Silva's 90-acre bog to the north, and a large corporate operation called Atlantic Cranberry Partners to the east. The Silvas came first. Frank Silva, 58 years old, 4th-generation cranberry farmer, stood at her property line in expensive waders. His daughter Rachel was with him, maybe 32, arms crossed over her company fleece. You're the one planting antiques? Heritage varieties, yes. You know the co-ops won't touch those? Ocean Spray wants Stevens hybrids. Uniform color, high yield, disease resistance. Lily kept working, checking water levels in the beds. The smell was earthy, mineral, ancient. Her hands were numb from cold water. My grandfather farmed these varieties for 40 years, she said. Rachel laughed, sharp and dismissive. Your grandfather lost his operation. That's not exactly a recommendation. Frank's expression was harder to read. He looked at the acidic water, then at the heritage vines. Even if they grow, the co-op won't buy them. And direct marketing heritage cranberries? That's boutique fantasy. This is a commodity crop. Lily had called 23 specialty food buyers the week before. 19 never called back. 3 said maybe. 1, an organic products distributor in Boston named Greenleaf Foods, said they'd take 50 pounds at $8 a pound if the fruit was certified organic and the quality was exceptional. For $100, total wouldn't save her. I have interest, she said carefully. Good luck, Rachel said, already turning away. You'll need it. Atlantic Cranberry Partners sent their operations manager the next afternoon. Marcus Webb, 41, MBA from UMass, drove a company truck that cost more than Lily had paid for the land. He stood on the high ground, not bothering with waiters. Miss Moreau, I'll be direct. We're consolidating parcels in this watershed. Your land is small, but it affects our water management. We'd like to buy it. $8,000. That's 25% more than you paid. Lily was chest deep in water, adjusting the inlet flow from the natural spring. It's not for sale. You've been here a month. You're farming varieties nobody wants. The soil chemistry is hostile. 8,000 is generous. Not for sale, she repeated. Webb's expression cooled. When you fail, we'll still be interested. At a lower price. He left mud on her access road. By November, the heritage vines were established, dark green runners spreading across the beds, adapted to the high-acid water that modern hybrids couldn't tolerate. But there was no fruit yet. That would take until next fall. She needed money now. She took a job at a fish processing plant in New Bedford. Overnight shift, gutting mackerel, $11 an hour. She worked midnight to 8 a.m., then drove back to tend the bogs, then slept in the truck camper for 4 hours, then back to the plant. Her hands cracked and bled. She lost 12 pounds she didn't have to lose. The Commercial Growers Association meeting happened on December 4th. Lily went because her grandfather's name was still on their historical membership list, and they didn't know he was dead. The room was packed with established farmers. Angry voices about co-op pricing, processing fees, new regulations. The co-op representative, a man in a tie named Morrison, explained market conditions, consumer preferences, efficiency requirements. Frank Silva stood. Some of us have been farming cranberries for 4 generations. You. Keep cutting prices, we can't survive. We need better contracts. Morrison's answer was corporate smooth. Market forces, competition, quality standards. Lily sat in the back and said nothing. Her operation was too small to care about co-op contracts. She wasn't farming for the commodity market anyway. But Rachel Silva saw her in the parking lot afterward. Must be nice, playing farmer on 40 acres while real operations try to survive. Wait until spring. Wait until the acid kills your vines, and you realize why nobody farms heritage varieties anymore. Lily drove home as the first hard freeze warnings posted. The freeze came on December 18th. Brutal, unexpected, down to 9 degrees. Lily woke in the camper to ice crusted on the inside of the windows. She pulled on layers and waited out in the dark with a headlamp. The Silva bog would lose vines. Modern hybrids were cold-hardy, but vulnerable to extreme freeze events. Atlantic Cranberry Partners had overhead sprinkler systems to protect their vines, but those cost hundreds of thousands to install. Lily reached her beds and looked down. The heritage vines were under 6 inches of water, the traditional flood she'd maintained following her grandfather's notes. The water had frozen on top, but beneath the ice, the vines were insulated, protected, dormant but alive. She crouched at the edge and waited for sunrise, breath fogging the air. By noon, the ice was melting. She broke through carefully and checked the vines. No damage. The heritage varieties had survived hard freezes for centuries using this exact method. Around her, the commercial operations were assessing damage. The Silvas lost 18% of their vines. Atlantic Cranberry Partners had protected theirs, but their emergency sprinkler operation cost thousands in electricity and labor. Lily said nothing to anyone. She went back to the fish plant that night and gutted mackerel until her arms went numb. But in the spring, everything changed. The heritage vines bloomed in late May, delicate pink flowers, thousands of them, covering the beds like snow. Modern hybrids bloomed too, but these were different, hardier, more flowers per vine, adapted to stress. And then the drought hit. June, July, August, barely any rain. The watershed streams dropped. Commercial bogs that relied on irrigation struggled. The co-op sent notices about water restrictions. The Silvas had to reduce flooding cycles. Atlantic Cranberry Partners drilled emergency wells at massive expense. Lily's operation ran on the natural spring that fed her wetland, the same acidic water source that made the land worthless. The spring never slowed. Her heritage vines, adapted to variable conditions, thrived. By September, her beds were heavy with fruit. Not the large, uniform berries the co-ops wanted, smaller, darker, intensely flavored. She harvested by hand using the traditional flood method, flooding the beds, using a wooden rake to lift the floating berries, corralling them with boom barriers her grandfather had described in the notebook. She called Greenleaf Foods. I have 300 pounds of certified organic heritage cranberries. Interested, the buyer drove out personally. The buyer from Greenleaf Foods was a woman named Diana Chun, maybe 45. who'd spent 20 years sourcing organic produce. She stood at the edge of Lily's bog on September 28th, watching the crimson berries float in dark water, and tasted one. Her expression changed. "These are extraordinary," she said quietly. "The flavor profile is completely different from commercial cranberries. More complex, deeper tartness, almost wine-like. They're early black and house," Lily said. "Heritage varieties. Grown in high-acid conditions." Diana ate another berry, thinking, "We can move 300 pounds immediately. But I need to make calls. There's a market for this: specialty food stores, high-end restaurants, organic co-ops. Can you scale production?" Lily looked at her 41 acres. "Most weren't planted yet. Next year, yes. This year, 300 pounds is what I have. I'll take it." $9 a pound. That was $2,700. More money than Lily had seen in months. But Diana wasn't finished. "I'm also calling Ocean Spray's Specialty Products Division. They have a heritage line they're developing. They might want to talk to you." 3 days later, Ocean Spray sent the commercial buyer, the man now standing in her bog, staring at her vines with an expression that had gone from skepticism to something like hunger. His name was Robert Teixeira. He'd been buying cranberries for 18 years. He walked the beds carefully, asked detailed questions about her cultivation methods, tested the water pH himself, examined the fruit. 32 tons per acre, he said again. In a drought year. On land everyone said was too acidic to farm. He looked at her. "How?" Lily opened her grandfather's notebook and showed him the pages. The heritage varietals. The traditional flooding system. The high-acid cultivation method that everyone had abandoned for modern approaches. Teixeira read carefully, taking pictures with his phone. "We've been trying to revive heritage production for our specialty line. We're getting maybe 12 tons per acre from experimental plots. You're getting nearly triple that." "The acid," Lily said simply. "Modern hybrids tolerate it. These varieties thrive in it. The higher the acid, the more intense the flavor, the better the yield. And everyone's been trying to neutralize the acid." "Yes." He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the floating crimson harvest. "I can offer you a contract. Specialty heritage line, premium pricing. $14 per pound, 3-year guarantee, with options to expand. How much can you produce?" Lily did the math in her head. She had 41 acres. Only 6 were planted now. If she expanded carefully, using her grandfather's methods, 20,000 pounds next year, 40,000 the year after. "We'll take everything you can grow." He pulled out a tablet. "I'm also authorized to ask. Would you consult for us? We have other growers sitting on acidic wetland they think is worthless. What would you charge to teach them your grandfather's methods?" Lily thought about her grandfather's words. Let the harvest speak. The harvest had spoken. Now, maybe, it was time to teach. $500 per day, she said. Plus expenses. Deal. By November, Lily had harvested her entire crop. 3,800 pounds of heritage cranberries. Greenleaf Foods took 300 pounds. Ocean Spray took the rest for their specialty line. Gross income, $51,200. She paid off the credit card. Quit the fish plant. Bought proper waiters and a used water pump. Hired 2 part-time workers to help expand the planted acreage. And Frank Silva came back. He arrived on a gray afternoon, alone this time, looking older than he had in September. "I heard Ocean Spray gave you a premium contract." "Yes, sir. And I heard you're pulling yields that are triple what we're getting on conventional operations." Lily nodded. "The heritage varieties produce more in high-acid conditions. It's what they evolved for." He looked at the expanded bed she was preparing, the dark water, the rust-colored soil. "I have 12 acres that's too acidic for our modern vines. Been fallow for 8 years. Would this work there?" She thought about the Atlantic Cranberry Partners operations, about the commercial growers who'd left, about everyone who'd told her she was wasting her time. She thought about her grandfather, who'd tried to share this knowledge and been ignored until he lost everything. "Yes," she said. "It would work. Would you teach me?" "Yes." By December, she was consulting for 4 operations, including, surprisingly, Atlantic Cranberry Partners, who'd quietly approached her after their modern hybrids underperformed again in the drought-stressed soil. She taught her grandfather's methods carefully: heritage varietals, traditional flooding, working with the acid instead of fighting it. Some growers paid her consulting fee. Some she helped for reduced rates because they reminded her of her grandfather, stubborn, desperate. willing to try the old ways when the new ways failed. Rachel Silva was one of those. She showed up without her father, looking tired. I owe you an apology. Lily was checking pH levels in a newly planted section. No, you said what conventional wisdom taught you. I was dismissive. That was wrong. Rachel paused. My father's talking about converting those 12 acres. I'd like to understand the science before we commit. Would you walk me through it? Lily spent 3 hours explaining the relationship between soil acidity, heritage varietals, and traditional cultivation methods. Rachel took notes in a field book almost identical to her grandfather's. The county extension agent came back in January. Same waiters, same state truck. He stood at the edge of her operation. Now 23 acres planted, dark water reflecting winter sky, heritage vines dormant but healthy. Miss Moreau, Agent Harrison, I owe you an apology. Several, actually. Lily kept working, preparing beds for spring planting. You told me what the research said. You weren't wrong to trust the science you know. I was wrong to dismiss knowledge I didn't understand. He pulled out a tablet. Ocean Spray contacted the extension office. They want to document your methods, possibly develop new guidelines for acidic wetland cultivation. Would you be willing to participate? She thought about her grandfather writing letters to the extension office, to the co-ops, to anyone who'd listen, letters that were filed away and forgotten. My grandfather tried to share this 30 years ago. Nobody listened. Harrison's face tightened. I found those letters in our archives. I read them. He was right, and we failed him. I can't fix that, but I can make sure we don't fail you the same way. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Okay, I'll participate, but I want my grandfather's name on the documentation. This is his knowledge. Absolutely. By March, the Ocean Spray contract had expanded. They wanted £50,000 for the following year, more than her operation could produce alone. She was helping establish 4 other heritage bog operations, teaching, consulting, sharing what her grandfather had preserved. And on March 14th, 1 year and 6 months after the auction, Lily stood in her flooded beds and watched new growth emerge, bright green shoots, thousands of them, covering 23 acres of land everyone had said was too acidic to farm. Her phone rang. Diana Chun from Greenleaf Foods. Lily, I have a request. There's a sustainable agriculture conference in Boston next month. They want someone to speak about heritage cultivation and working with challenging soil conditions. I gave them your name. Lily watched the green shoots, the dark water, the land healing and producing. I'll do it, but I'm bringing my grandfather's notebook. This is his story as much as mine. That evening, she sat in a small apartment she'd rented in town. The camper shelf finally retired, and opened her grandfather's field notebook. The pages were more worn now, stained with bog water and field dirt. She turned to the last entry he'd written, a week before he died. The land teaches us if we listen. Be patient. Be humble. Trust the old knowledge. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more, but this is everything I learned. Use it well. Teach it when the time comes. She closed the notebook carefully and looked at the photographs on her desk. Her grandfather and his waiters, standing in a cranberry bog in 1987, smiling. Beside it, a new photo. Lily in the same pose, same waiters, her own bog behind her. He'd left her $6,000 and wisdom. She'd turned it into land, harvest, contracts, and something bigger. Proof that the old way still worked, that high-acid wetland wasn't worthless, just misunderstood, that heritage knowledge could outlast corporate dismissal. Tomorrow she'd plant another 5 acres. Next month she'd speak at the conference. Next year she'd harvest enough to supply Ocean Spray's entire heritage line. But tonight, she just sat with her grandfather's notebook and felt the weight of gratitude for the knowledge he'd preserved, for the land that had vindicated him, for the harvest that had finally let his voice be heard. The acid wasn't a curse. It never had been. It was an advantage waiting for someone patient enough to understand.